Grades should signify competence in the journey of life.
For the most part, the assignment of A doesn't necessarily mean competent.
The American Religious Town Hall is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
Welcome to the American Religious Town Hall. I'm James Weingartner, sitting in for Pastor Lutz, and I have four panelists today that are excited to talk about a subject on education. And so here we are, but you don't know who they are yet, so let's let them introduce themselves. I'm going to do it on my right.
Hi, I'm Tom Plumley. I'm the senior minister at First Christian Church in Fort Worth, Texas. We're a part of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ.
My name is Canon John Peterson. I am an Episcopal priest, and I'm canonically resident of the Diocese of Washington, D.C.
Hi, I'm Carl Troval. I'm professor of ethics and history at Concordia University in Austin, Texas.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tony Matthews, and I am the senior pastor at North Garland Baptist Fellowship in Garland, Texas.
We're sure glad that you're here, and these usually our six panelists have been pared down to four to make room because we want to social distance a little bit, but these people are ready to talk about our important subject. And it's about grades in school. When teachers first began to provide grades to their students, a C grade meant that the student had learned exactly what teachers expected them to learn. If they fell below what was expected, they received the lesser grade of D. And if they failed to measure up to that, they received an F. A B grade meant that the student had gone beyond what was expected, demonstrating aptitude, initiative, and discipline. For anyone to receive an A grade, the student needed to excel. Excellence required minds that truly went beyond even those who were above average. Recently, USA Today ran an article in which it claimed that 38.9% of high school students graduated with an A average. Today, 47% of high school students graduate with an A average. Have American students evolved into a new level of intelligence? Are teachers caving into pressures from the administrators or parents or students or from some other source? We'd like our panelists to consider the implications of what excellence means today. Question one is, do you believe that the current situation is evidence of grade inflation, or do we simply have brighter students than in the past? Are grades to be earned, or are they to be given? Two, by lowering expectations and granting such high grades, are we helping or hurting our children? And three, if roughly half of American students are excellent, why is America lagging so in many areas of accomplishment, especially in science? We begin our discussion today with Dr. Carl Troval.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it. The direction I want to go with this is that I think that how we understand what grades are should be completely revised. In the last 2 years in my own teaching, I've decided to scrap the kind of traditional way that I evaluate students. It used to be students would have 3 tests and maybe 2 or 3 papers and maybe some short response, and each of them would be evaluated on an A to an F basis, and then they would get their grade at the end of the semester after you total up all of that. And I have since shifted to what's called specifications grading, because one thing you learn in the university is that students will argue for a B plus if they got a B, or an A minus if they got a B plus. And I was getting sick and tired of arguing with students about what their grade was because it was my evaluation. But truth be told, I'll be quite honest, it's pretty tough to defend some of the grades to the students, not because I don't believe that that's what I think it is, but they're looking for objective criteria. But, well, why did I get this specific grade? What were your exact criteria for making that decision? And I grew up in, I'm the teacher, you're not, that's that, right? I mean, essentially. But I think that students deserve better than that. They need to know exactly where they're at, just like all of us as employees like to know where we're at with our bosses. And the specifications grading does this. Basically allows students to redo their assignments over and over and over again. For instance, if they write a paper and they get a C, I say, write it over. And I will not accept it until it is an A paper. It's more of an A minus B plus paper. Once they've hit that area, then I'm good. Then they can move on to the next assignment. So that basically, because here's how it is in real life. If I don't write something for my boss that's exactly right, this is what he does. Well, you failed. He doesn't say that, or you got a C on it. He says, this can be better. I want you to rewrite it. That's how it is in real life. I mean, all of us we're rewriting constantly. And I thought, competence is learning where you fail, getting someone to help you see where you failed, and then giving you the opportunity to succeed at it and to continue over and over and over again. And so now I do every assignment allowing students to redo tests, to redo papers. And some people say, well, that sounds like you've tripled your work as a teacher. Well, maybe that's good, because I certainly don't want to be a lazy teacher. But I found that students, once they know that they can rewrite it, they totally relax, and they actually try to do a good job because they don't want to rewrite it. So I'm finding the paper quality to be even better. So I think that maybe this A through F system is kind of skewed, and that we just need to more gamify it, if you will. That you achieve levels of competence, and when you've reached it, you don't get a grade on it. You just reach the levels.
Dr. Tony.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I read an article where it talked about how historically, of course, schools were charged with teaching kids how to read, reason, and do arithmetic, and that was basically the process that they had, and that would basically measure their competence. And there are so many different ways that kids learn. What's alarming, or what's surprising, is that 47% of high school students graduate with an A average, but of course there's a Harvard study out that say that high school students basically take about 6 years to graduate with a 4-year degree. And they say, the same study, that just 29% earn a degree in a 2-year school within 3 years. So something is, if a lot of kids are getting A's in high school and yet is not resulting in performance at the college level, something is going on. The question, are grades to be earned or are they to be given? I think the answer is obvious. They should be earned. I think how teachers teach and assignments that they give students should be varied, because people learn in different ways. One of the things I read that I disagree with is that they said one of the reasons that the telltale is that kids were performing lower on SAT tests. But I've met some very sharp kids that they don't test well with SAT and ACT, but yet they're just brilliant individuals. And I think teachers should really understand their students and the level of competency that the students have. I do know this to be a fact, that a lot of teachers do give grades out because of pressure from administrators, and which is something that I think is a disservice to our students. I think a kid making a C basically will show the kid where he or she needs to work on. To give a kid an A or B that's not deserved, and even with all of the other, not just with academics, but if they're doing their assignments, if the teacher gives extra credit, if that kid makes a C, I think it's just important to give the kid a C, unless there are some other variables, with graduating or something. If the kid needs a C plus or whatever, I can see some grace in that matter. But to give grades out, I think is a big disservice.
Thank you. Reverend Tom Plumley.
You know where grade inflation started?
Tell me.
Harvard Law School?
It started in the 60s when professors realized that they could save lives by inflating the grade of young men to keep them out of the Vietnam War, to keep them in college, even though they weren't doing college-level work. That was an interesting find to me. But you know, I guess it sets the standard for where we ought to look. What are motivations behind the giving of grades that have not been earned? Number one, I want to say, Carl, I love the system you've outlined. That sounds great. Which basically is just let's junk the system. But you know, there are grad schools there that are grading your university, and your students are more or less likely to get into graduate school because of the undergraduate program that they've been to. And if it is well known, well respected, which means it has students that have good grades, that's an incentive for the professors at your school to give better grades. It's also an incentive whenever you have a school that has students involved in the evaluation of professors. Well, if my students are going to be evaluating me, give myself a PhD and I'll be Professor Plumley. If my students are going to be evaluating me, I don't want to make them too angry.
Tom, don't tell the secrets that we got going.
I guess what I'm saying is there are a lot of outside motivations, including the fundraising that goes on at any school to keep the schools going, that puts pressure on administrators, to put pressure on professors, to show that this school is worth the investment of the donor. Maybe the whole system is just so fraught with difficulty that we need to figure out a different way to do it. I know that different way starts with going back to the notion that it seems to me you're starting out with. Let's make sure the kids are learning what they are supposed to learn in this course. That's what we're after, isn't it? That's what an employer would be wondering. Did you actually learn about, world history from 1000 to 1500 AD, or not? Can you handle that information? Can that inform who you are, or not? And that's the important thing. Whether you were able to come up with a paper that just blew everybody's socks off with some new idea is probably irrelevant about whether you learned the material, about what the history of the world was between those periods of time. So if I learn the material, that's the important thing. So how do we pass the word along that I learned the material?
I'm looking for that employer that is anxious for me to know the history from 1000 to 2000. Reverend Canon John Peterson.
Shall we have an exam right now? I believe, and I could be wrong, but I believe that the moderator's statement really is talking about high school, I think, at this point. And I suspect that there would be certainly some differences between high school and measuring competencies in contrast to college students, et cetera. I mean, I'm really impressed with what you're suggesting, and I suspect that there's, Carl, a relationship to what is being called today competency-based learning in high school.
Yep.
That is certainly a formula that's being used, and I'll speak about that in a couple of seconds. But I have to go back to an earlier part of the program, because I think it shows what happens to some students who have straight A's. Now, this case actually happened in Missouri, but I'm sure that every other state has the same thing. But the story that I'm telling you is that comes from Missouri, that honor roll students or straight A's went in to the SAT exams, and they the three that they're talking about here, the three had straight A's from 9 to 12, and they failed the SATs. They did not get a passing grade in the SAT exams.
Be careful now. I went to high school in Missouri.
We've identified the problem. and so I think that, grade inflation is certainly a problem when you look, or when you put it against an SAT. But I thought that your point about that was also some people simply cannot take exams like SATs. I'm one of them. If I had to depend on getting into graduate school, etc., on SAT exams, I would have never gotten into graduate school. But I could very easily have been able to do what Carl is doing by rewriting papers 2 or 3 times to be able to get it up to an A. So I think that every student is different in the way in which they are able to face things. So the question becomes is, how do you evaluate? How does the school evaluate? How do the colleges evaluate when accepting students, etc.? And one of the real fears in programs, now I believe you said that every student can work up to an A-. Is that what you said?
Well, I have to have a standard by which, and I thought to have, an excellent paper, not every student's going to be able to do that. So I have to lower the standard a little bit. I still want to encourage people to write their best, and I'll give them critical feedback. But I'm aiming in that B+, A- level as the kind of goal I want the students
You
to
still
do.
have students who make A+, some really
Sure, there's some who
exceptional
write
students.
better
Okay.
than, yeah.
So
They can write a better paper than me.
I think
Careful,
that
don't tell them.
I think that that type of evaluation is critically important.
Yeah.
But one of the real concerns about the competency-based learning is that parents are afraid that their kids won't have the type of expectations of grades to be able to go to colleges or universities. And so that becomes a real problem too, regardless what they might have gotten on their SAT exams, etc. So I think that, we're dealing with a very volatile situation, but certainly something has to be done in relationship to evaluating competency, because it's just not working now.
So I have one other comment. I think that the other piece here that can be, and I don't have the stats, but I believe that my wife told me this, that if you have students who do not pass along with the rest of their class, that they are already at a high risk of dropping out, and therefore a high risk of all other kinds of behaviors. So that failing a student may seem like, oh yeah, we want excellence, we're going to fail them. But what you're really doing is you're setting them up for a much larger failure in life. It's far better to pass them along without them having full competency than it is for them to fail and not go with the rest of their
But I
group.
can see why that would be a real situation.
Yeah.
That,
Like going to
I'm no
prison.
good, and
Like going to prison. And that's
Yeah.
why administrators pressure faculty members to do exactly that, because they realize the statistics of the dropout rates.
Well, you may have just helped me, because I struggle with knowing that teachers can only fail teachers can only fail a certain amount of students.
Yeah.
I just kind of struggle with that, because teachers don't fail students. Students fail themselves.
You're right.
And
Some students I know would disagree with you. Let's take a quick break and we'll be right back. Remember to take down the information on the address.
is it over that fast?
We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching. And now, back to you and today's closing statements.
Welcome back. We do want to hear from you, so please take that address and write and email and let us know. What have you thought about what's been said here today, and what would you like to hear our panelists talk about? Let's now summarize our panelists' thoughts on this subject, and we'll begin to my right.
Thank you. One of the things that I didn't get a chance to say and want to say is let's please not let this conversation move us to think that we need to be even more dependent than we already are on standardized statewide testing. And because that is that's another whole program. We've talked about it before on here, but that's a whole industry that's, in my opinion, corrupt. There is a certain level of commercialization of education, certainly at the college level, absolutely at the high school level, and I think earlier than that as well. Grades are the reason for that. And we need to find together new ways to evaluate and to communicate to the larger world whether or not a student has done the work necessary and has learned the academic discipline that they're being that they're being in class for.
Dr. Trovall?
I want to give credit to, the Specifications Grading is the name of a book that was written. It's been influential, and I believe the last name of the author is Walvrud, but I'm not sure, but I do want to give her credit for this idea because it was transformative for me, and I've got still working on it, but I think that one thing I really liked about it is that so many of us, we learn when we fail. And if we create an educational system where students are afraid to fail, I think that we're failing them, because I think it's about learning to fail or to not succeed completely, and then to have the opportunity to learn so that you can go at it again and then succeed, because that's what life is. And I think that that's the piece of lifelong learning. It's what we're doing on a constant basis. I'm going to go after this show and go, man, I wish I would have said this, and I failed not to say that. And, thanks.
Dr. Tony?
Yeah, and picking up on what Carl said, failure is not fatal. We need to let our students know that, hey, failure is not fatal. It's just a great opportunity to learn, as Carl mentioned. Just having a little joke, I know we have a lot of folks in our culture who would say that some people graduated cum laude, or they would say cum laude, and some people graduated summa cum laude, and others said, have mercy, Lordy. You know? just let me get out of school. But at the end of the day, I've always said, I'd rather be an original or an average original than a perfect carbon copy. So if you know, wherever I am in academics, you know, if I'm a C student, give me the C, let me work my way up to a B or an A, rather than giving me an A just to, you know, for grade inflation. And particularly in high school, I think that's critical for high school students to just give those high school students what they make, because you lower the expectations, and I think it hurts them when you lower expectations for them.
Kenneth Peterson?
Well, I have to just say something to Tony for sure. The panel totally agrees that you're definitely summa cum laude. So. Yes. I mean, one of the things that Carl has said, which is scary, and it's that if a student fails, they might drop out altogether.
That's right.
And so, while it's good to be able to build on your failure, it has to be done in a constructive way that will enable a person to be able to grow instead of being totally deflated and ultimately drop out. And I think that this is a real dilemma within education today, and particularly when you have a class structure that is giving nearly 50% A's. So where does that person who gets the F? Imagine what that psychologically does to a person who's in that type of a situation. And so I think that we need to rethink, and we certainly have to be sensitive, and a little bit of empathy would go a long ways in this whole issue of education.
Well, thank you very much. Our education system is really the basis of our country's moving forward, isn't it? And what we do with those students is important. I know that our schools work really hard to make sure that our students are prepared for college. And we want to continue to talk about this both on and offline. So write us if you can, and we'd love to talk with you about it. The charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. The rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America, we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. And now, friends, until next week, at the same time and over the same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. May the God of all of us bless all of you.